Your cocktail is made up of things that you are good at, that you're strong at. But God puts something else in the cocktail too. Into the cocktail, God will put something that you are completely, totally, utterly useless at. Into the cocktail, God will put something that you can't do. Something that just isn't you. And God puts that in your cocktail too. Did it with Moses. Moses had a lot of good stuff in his cocktail. Brought up in the Egyptian royal family, probably knew the Pharaoh personally, knew the language, knew the etiquette, knew how the Egyptian royal system worked. But he was a rubbish speaker. Maybe he had a speech with them, but we don't know exactly what it was. But when God called Moses to go to Egypt to rescue the people, he said, I can't talk. And God said, send him. David, the kid, 2 small to wear the armor. St. Paul would jump into the New Testament. Great intellect. Trained under one of the greatest rabbis of Israelites. And he had a thing which he refers to as his thorn in the flesh. He also refers to it as a messenger from Satan. That's quite strong language. Paul had something, we have no idea what it is, but he had something that made it hard for him to do what God had called him to do. And again he asked God, will you please take this away? Will you sort this out, this problem? And God said, no. I'm keeping the problem. Beautiful phrase from God. My grace is sufficient, for my strength is made perfect. What's in your cocktail? What is God calling you to? What is God giving you to? It's not necessarily religious stuff. It could be any part of the workings of the world. It's all God's will. Your strengths, your skills, your experiences, your abilities. And something that you can't do. Because God's like that. That's how He works. What is God calling you to do? Let's just be quiet and read the question. What we see from Abraham is there were a lot of things in his cocktail that were just spot on for him. God wanted somebody to be father of a new nation that would show the Creator God to the world. Well, here's a man who believes in the Creator God. Put that in the cocktail, that's useful. Here is a man who was raised to be a leader. Put that in the cocktail. Here's a man who has wealth, who has power, who has an army, who has everything you need to build a new nation. Put that in the cocktail. A parish that raises up people who then push off to go and get ordained. And I'm one of those people. And when I was just preparing to push off from HolyTrinity to get ordained, a very, very long time ago, it was all set and I was booked for a Church of England selection conference. And we had a Sunday morning service here, broadcast live on ITV. That used to happen back in the dark ages. Huge numbers of people would watch it. The church was packed. And when we were working on it, the producer said to me, have you ever thought of going into television? And I thought, whoa, that's more exciting than getting ordained and being a vicar, isn't it? So I sought wise counsel from a lovely lady who was church warden here at the time. And she said, I never really could imagine it was a vicar. So I applied for a job. And the date for my vicar selection interviews was coming near. And I went to stay at a monastery for a week to seek to hear God's voice. Should I be a vicar? Should I work in broadcasting? My first evening there, I was sat opposite the head monk at dinner time. He looked me straight in the eye and said, how long have you felt called to be a monk? What went through my head is words that I shouldn't say in church. It was, no, please God, don't call me to be a monk. I really don't want to be a monk. And that threw me into a depression. And the depression lasted for most of that week. And it's one of the most depressed times in my life. What is God calling me to do? What is my contact with God? What does God want of me? Does He want me to be a vicar? Does He want me to work in broadcasting? Does He want me to be in a monk? Please no, God, not about that. But I come here to listen to God. So the head monk can look straight at me, straight at me. How do we do that? This isn't just about whether you become a vicar or not. This is not just about your Christian calling. This is about your life, your purpose. It could be lots of things. This isn't just for young people. It's whatever age you are. Whatever age you are, what is God calling of you for the next phase? What's in the contact? So let's take a look at Abraham and see if we can learn anything from it. I want to take you through the story of Abraham, and I hope that as we go through that, it might shed some light on your own story. Let's go right back to the beginning, to the day that he was born. Abraham was born in a city called Ur. Ur had been the largest city in the world. It was a huge city that had done incredibly well on the industry of producing wheat. They had developed industrial scale farming. In the centre of Ur, and it's still there, look it up, internet search images. There is one image that will come to you. The centre of Ur was a huge ziggurat dedicated to the moon goddess Nana. The people of Ur worshipped the moon goddess. Abraham was born into this society, and he was given the name Great Father, esteemed ancestor. Now we know from later the story that Abraham was a very, very wealthy man, and that name implies that he was born into it. It implies that he was born into expectation of importance. He was born to be the leader of a people. It's not just Abraham and his wife and his nephew and a Ford Fiesta. We're dealing with a people here. And Abraham was born to be the next in line, in a line of succession of leaders. So he grew up with this. He grew up with this expectation. He grew up with this name, Great Father. And then somewhere along the line, we don't know how old he was he a teenager, was he in his 20s, at some point, the great and auspicious day of his marriage. He was to marry a beautiful bride called Sarai. Was it an arranged marriage? Very wealthy, influential family, very possible and political. This moment, this marriage, this is what it all hung on. Great father, to be a great father, you need a wife. He would have dressed in a tall hat. He would have dressed in huge gold earrings and a chunky gold necklace and big gold bangles on his wrist and on his arm, because that's how wealthy people dressed in those days. He would have dressed in a shoulder to floor length, beautifully ornamented and woven and colourful garments. That's how they dressed in that part of the world at that time. He and Sarai were married. And then after marriage, well, you know what happens after marriage, especially when you're called great father, there is a thing that you've got to do. And he and Sarai did the thing. And they did it again. And they did it again. And again. And again. And again. And people start to say, are you alright? Everything okay at home? You and Sarah? Is it all working okay? Because the great father couldn't have kids. How do you think that felt? It's not a great experience. There'll be some here who know this experience and know what it feels like. It's not great when your name is Great Father. And a whole community is expected to use that. Now, that wasn't the only thing going wrong. Something else was going wrong. Something we know a lot about. Global warming was happening at the time. Climate change. Sea levels were rising. Is in southern Iraq. It's quite near the sea. The sea level was rising. Salt water was coming into the irrigation channels, and the wheat was failing. This huge city, which survived on its wheat harvest, was struggling. People started leaving. They had to leave. The land couldn't sustain the population. And Abraham's father says, we've got to go. We've got to leave. Pack up, all of us. So this wasn't just a couple of bags and forth fiesta. This was probably a community of hundreds of people. With Abraham's father, Terah, leading them. The heir apparent of Abraham. And they travelled hundreds of miles north, following the river Euphrates, finding a new place to settle. Not just a home to settle in, but a bit of land for all these people to settle in. And they travelled right up to the north of what is now Syria. And then they settled. And they built a new city, and they called it Haran. And they built a temple to Nana, the moon god. Still there. And they settled. They couldn't grow wheat. This was the sheep farming area. Abraham and his family joined into sheep farming, and they were really good at it. And they became very wealthy, and their tribe, their group became greater and stronger. And somewhere along the line, we don't know how, we don't know where, but somewhere along the line, Abraham had grasped that Nana, the moon goddess, wasn't God. There was a God, one God, the God who created everything, the moon, the sun, the whole shebang. That was the God that Abraham was interested in. That was the God that Abraham was listening to. And the years rolled on, and the decades rolled on, and Abraham and Sarah tried and tried and tried to have kids, and they didn't. And he was called Great Father. And Abraham heard God, and God said, come on, Abraham, move on. You were never meant to stop here at Haran. You were always supposed to be aiming for Canaan. That was his dad's plan. Go there. I will make you a great people. Your offspring. What offspring? But Abraham got up and he went because he trusted God, and they headed south into Canaan, what is now the land of Israel. And they settled there, and more years rolled on. And God said to Abraham, Abraham, look at this land. Your descendants will inherit this. No pressure, God. You might have noticed we're having a little bit of a problem in that area. By this time, Sarai is coming up to menopause. Their whole productive life. No kids. The story goes on. There's a famine there, they travel south to Egypt, and then we begin to see what kind of a man Abraham is. Because when they go to Egypt, Abraham is doing business with Pharaoh. Abraham is welcomed. And this is a weird story, read it for yourself, because there's some odd stuff happening. This is the Bible, it's full of odd stuff. And I'm going to just leave you to discover the odd stuff for yourself. But in Egypt, Abraham is mates with Pharaoh. It's a little bit more complicated than that. And then they come back, and this tribe, this group that he is the leader of, supposedly the ancestor of his future, except they have no kids, is now so big that it's too big. And there's tensions. They start getting basically civil war within their own tribe. And Abraham blocks his nephew so that we've got to split. We can't sustain this. It's not working. Our sheep farming business has got to divide into 2 sheep farming businesses. And they go this way. And still, Abraham is great. And then there's a war in the area. There's an alliance of kings come together to fight another alliance of kings. And the first lot of kings fight the second lot of kings, defeat them, and a whole lot of people and stuff gets taken captive, including Abraham's nephew Lot. At this point, Abraham brings out his own private army. Do you know Abraham had his own private army? We have in our minds this scruffy little man who lives in a dirty tent. He was not a scruffy little man in a dirty tent. He had an army, and it was the best army in the region. And he chased after the first lot of kings, who had defeated the second lot of kings, and defeated them. Him and his army. And he rescued everybody who had been taken captive. Everything that had been taken captive, and he returned all the captives to their own kingdoms. And the second alliance of kings said, thanks, Abraham. You're a mate. What can we give you? And he said, please give me anything. God is looking after you. So, how do we know what God is calling us to? How do you know what is